They laughed before the coffin touched the earth. The sound cut through the wind like broken glass, cruel and deliberate. Margaret's pearls rattled against her throat as she whispered, "Guess she's crying for the inheritance." I didn't look at her. I watched the coffin sink instead, inch by inch, taking with it every lie my husband had ever told. The veil brushed my lips, cold as silence. They thought they could humiliate me into breaking. But grief doesn't break. It transforms. And I was already transforming. What does a woman owe to a world that mocks her mourning? How long can silence hold before it erupts? If justice comes in whispers, can laughter hear it coming? And when the fire finally speaks, who will be left to listen? The house was too quiet when I returned. Silence held the weight of every insult I didn't answer. Their laughter still echoed in my chest like something unfinished. Charles' study door was half open. His cologne still lingered, expensive and deceitful. I opened the safe. Inside, there was no comfort, only ledgers, receipts, secrets dressed in neat handwriting. I didn't cry. I read. Every number whispered betrayal. Every page, a story of a man who built his empire on sand and on my trust. They laughed today because they thought I was poor. They'll learn soon what poor really means. Grief teaches patience. So does revenge. Margaret called that night, her voice sweet with venom. She said, "We'll be reviewing the will, dear. Don't get too comfortable." I smiled into the phone, said nothing, and marked the date. When the wolves send an invitation you don't refuse, you sharpen your teeth. Morning came gray and ruthless. I dressed in black again, not for mourning, but for armor. They'd expect the widow to tremble. I intended to let them believe it, because when you're invisible, you can see everything. And I planned to see them all fall. The law firm smelled of old paper and arrogance. They greeted me with half smiles and shallow pity. Margaret led the way, pearls swinging, eyes alive with triumph. She thought today would be my breaking. I let her think so, because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, quiet, patient, smiling behind a veil. They thought grief made me weak. It only made me quiet, and quiet women are the ones men should fear most. The will reading began like theater. Margaret's voice trembled with fake sorrow. Leonard pretended to wipe a tear. Nora's perfume filled the room like poison disguised as flowers. When Daniel read Charles' final words, I didn't blink. His assets, his estate, his everything, left under review due to marital dispute. They laughed again, but Daniel's eyes flicked toward me. He knew I'd already seen the unedited version. Power doesn't always belong to those who shout first. Sometimes it waits in the dark with a pen in its hand. That night, I reread every document, every transfer, every lie. Charles had hidden money in accounts his family didn't know existed. He trusted no one, not even them. But the codes, the ledgers, the signatures, they were mine now. I didn't sleep. I learned. Because revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with knowledge. Margaret called again. Her tone carried the satisfaction of a woman who believed the world still knelt for her. She said, "My son would have wanted his family taken care of. You should remember your place." I looked at the deeds in my hand. The signatures that proved every inch of her arrogance was built on a lie. "My place," I whispered. "It's already higher than your reach." I met Daniel the next morning at the bank. He looked tired, wary, like a man who knew too much, but couldn't yet pick a side. He told me about the offshore accounts, about the irregularities. I told him to leave the rest to me, he asked. "What are you planning, Evelyn?" I smiled. "Balanced, By the end of that week, Margaret's credit line froze. Leonard's company lost a contract. Nora's name appeared on a list she couldn't explain. None of them knew it was me. Not yet, but they'd feel it soon. The slow, suffocating pull of consequences dressed as coincidence. And when the walls began to close, I'd still be smiling, patient as truth itself. They were starting to feel the cracks. Margaret's voice on the phone carried the tremor of someone pretending she still owned the world. Leonard was angrier now. His temper no longer looked rich, only desperate. I watched them unravel one transaction at a time. No one suspects the widow. No one expects her to understand numbers or vengeance. Daniel called to warn me. They think someone inside the bank leaked details. I told him, let them think whatever helps them sleep. The truth doesn't need witnesses. It only needs timing. Margaret decided to summon me to the family estate. She still thought command sounded like invitation. When I arrived, the air smelled of money losing its confidence. Paintings were gone from the walls, lights dimmed to save electricity. Leonard's voice carried from the hall, accusations sharp, fear sharper. They turned on Daniel first. They always need a scapegoat before they find the mirror. I let them talk. Let them choke on the taste of their own panic. Then I smiled and asked, did you finally notice how silence spends its wealth? They accused me then, right there in the drawing room where laughter once echoed louder than truth. Margaret pointed her glass at me. You did this, she hissed. You're destroying us. I stepped closer. No, Margaret. You did that the day you mistook cruelty for strength. Leonard tried to shout me down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just laid the folder on the table. Signed deeds, proof of Charles' hidden accounts, the transfer dates already sealed. Their silence was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. After that day, the estate felt smaller. Their whispers filled every hallway, but no one spoke to me directly. They were busy tearing at one another, desperate to find a villain easier to punish than themselves. I didn't need to move another piece. I'd already won. Now, all I had to do was wait and watch the walls close in. Revenge isn't fire. It's gravity. It doesn't burn you. It pulls you down until you can't breathe. By nightfall, the storm broke over the roof like applause for everything collapsing. Margaret's shouts turned to sobs. Leonard slammed doors until his own echo answered back. I stood in the driveway, rain soaking through my coat, watching lights flicker behind their curtains. That house had taken my love, my peace, my name. Now it was devouring theirs. I whispered to the rain. We're almost even. Silence became my favorite sound. It told me when they were panicking. It told me when they were lying. Margaret stopped calling. Leonard started drinking before noon. Nora's social posts disappeared overnight. The empire was collapsing one invoice at a time. Daniel visited again, nervous, uncertain which side of the story he was standing on. He said, "They think you're finished." I said, "Then they're finally thinking." Margaret tried to bargain next. Pride always begs before it breaks. She arrived unannounced. Pearls still shining, dignity already gone. "I know you've been meddling," she said. "Whatever you think you'll gain, you won't win." I poured her tea. I already did. She looked at me then, truly looked and saw what her son never did. That grief wasn't my weakness. It was my rebirth. Leonard came next, louder, angrier. He called me a thief, a manipulator, a curse. But the truth doesn't care what name you give it. It still ruins you the same way. He slammed the papers onto my table. "You'll regret this." I smiled. I already did. That's why I stopped forgiving. Nora broke first. She called in tears, her voice shaking with something that almost sounded like regret. She said, "I didn't know he was lying to you, to any of us." I wanted to believe her, but pity is the first crack in victory. So I kept my voice soft, You married his shadow, Nora. Don't confuse the darkness for love. By week's end, every asset was frozen, every secret unwrapped. Daniel delivered the last folder himself. It's done, he said quietly. He didn't ask how I'd managed it. Men like him rarely ask questions they don't want answers to. I walked him to the door. This isn't revenge, Daniel, I said. He frowned. Then what is it? Balance. The storm waited for dusk. It always does. Margaret called for me again. Not with pride this time, but with panic. She said she wanted to talk, to end this quietly. I almost laughed. The same woman who mocked my tears now wanted mercy. I went anyway, not for forgiveness, but for closure. Sometimes the final act isn't revenge. It's revelation. The drawing room smelled like wilted roses and regret. Margaret was smaller now, voice trembling with the weight of her own survival. She said, "You've taken everything." I looked around at the empty walls, the dust where portraits once hung. No, I told her softly. He did. She wanted someone to hate. But hate can't survive in the mirror for long. Leonard stormed in, furious, drunk, wild with loss. He called me a vulture. Said I'd ruined his family. I didn't answer. I just slid the final document across the table, the one proving he'd already signed away his inheritance in debt years ago. Sometimes justice doesn't scream. It whispers your own signature back at you. Nora entered quietly, mascara smudged, voice shaking. She said, "Was any of this worth it?" I looked at her, the one who'd joined in their laughter, who'd watched my grief like a show, and for the first time I saw her not as an enemy, but a reflection of everything this family built on vanity and silence. "Maybe not," I said, "but it's done." Daniel came after they left. He didn't speak for a long time, just stood there watching the rain trace lines down the window. When he finally turned to me, he said, "It's over, Evelyn." I shook my head. "No, Daniel, it's balanced." Outside, thunder rolled away like applause fading into distance. Inside, silence felt almost like peace. Almost. Morning came without thunder for the first time in months. The city was still unsure whether to call what happened justice or tragedy. I walked through the quiet, breathing air that didn't taste of fear anymore. Freedom isn't loud. It hums low, like something you almost forget how to hear. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't look over my shoulder. I just walked. The house felt larger now, though emptier. Charles' things were gone. I'd sold them all. The ghosts were quieter without furniture to echo from. I found an old photograph of us, smiling, pretending. I didn't burn it. I just turned it face down. Some memories deserve darkness more than fire. Daniel visited again without papers this time. He said he'd resigned from the firm. Too much gray, not enough truth, he admitted. We talked for hours. Not about Charles, not about money, but about beginning again. He didn't ask if I was lonely. He already knew. Grief changes its shape, but never its shadow. Letters arrived from creditors, journalists, lawyers, each one wanting a piece of what was left of the hearts. I answered none of them. For every page they'd sent me before, mocking, belittling, dismissing. This was my silence returned. The kind that doesn't need words to be heard. At dusk, I returned to the cemetery. The grass had grown back where the grave had sunk. No laughter this time, only wind. I laid a single white rose and whispered, "We're even, not him and me and everything that tried to break me." Then I turned away, and for the first time, I didn't look back. News travels quietly when ruin is complete. Margaret sold the mansion last month. Leonard disappeared overseas, chasing investors that don't exist. Nora filed for divorce. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Their laughter had finally gone silent, its echo spent. At the auction, I saw strangers bidding on their memories. Every vase, every portrait, every polished lie, sold to someone who didn't know the story. Justice doesn't need witnesses. It only needs an ending. I didn't stay to watch them lose everything. I only waited until the portrait sold, Charles smiling at strangers who'd never know the man beneath the frame. As the gavel struck, something inside me loosened. Not joy, not victory, just release. Sometimes closure isn't about what you win back, but what you finally stop carrying. Outside, the air was clean. Cold, but honest. Daniel caught up to me on the steps. He said, "You could have destroyed them completely." I looked at him, the city lights catching the edge of his tired smile. "I already did," I said, "just not the way they expected." He nodded once and, for the first time, didn't look at me like a client. Weeks later, I moved to a smaller place by the coast. No echoes, no ghosts, no laughter left to haunt the walls. Some nights, I still wake up expecting to hear the storm. But all I find is quiet, and the sound of waves forgiving the shore. Maybe that's what survival sounds like. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think of me. The woman they laughed at, the widow they pitied. But it doesn't matter anymore. Their voices can't reach this far. What matters is this: I didn't need to destroy them to win. I just had to stop letting them define me. And that's the thing about laughter. Once it's gone, all that's left is the echo of the woman who never needed their approval to rise.